A few hours before divorce court, I thought I was the one in control. But when my wife stepped out of a limo with a retired judge at her side, my world started collapsing. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she leaned close and whispered, "Eric, you should ask yourself why your father's name is on those offshore accounts." That one line didn't just threaten me, it threatened my entire family's empire. A few hours before divorce court, her arrival in a limo left me speechless. That line isn't just dramatic, it's my reality. And if you think you know how this story ends, trust me, you don't. I woke up that morning in Dallas with the kind of heaviness you can't shake. The storm outside was pounding against my window like it was keeping score with my heartbeat. Each clap of thunder felt like a reminder. Today was the day my marriage officially ended. Divorce court. 2 words I never thought would define my life. But here I was, staring at the ceiling at 5:30 a.m., wondering if my wife, Natalie, was lying awake too, or if she was sleeping peacefully, already imagining a life without me. The world outside looked gray, and inside me, everything felt gray too. I got out of bed, put on my best suit, the one I usually wore when closing deals at the firm. My tie was sharp, shoes polished, hair slicked back, just the way Dallas attorneys like to present themselves, confident, untouchable. But no matter how much I adjusted my cufflinks or straightened my tie, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. You ever get that sense that the ground under you is about to give way? That was me. Natalie Brooks, my wife for almost 12 years, or at least she was until everything fell apart. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't the type to walk into a room and demand attention. She had this quiet strength that you only noticed when you looked closely. And maybe that was my mistake. I stopped looking closely. Natalie gave up a career in nursing to support me while I climbed the ladder at Whitman and Carter, one of the toughest firms in Texas. She carried me through my late nights, my self-doubt. And then I betrayed her. I'll admit it. I cheated with a younger associate at my firm, Melanie. I told myself it was just stress, temptation, weakness. But the truth was, I was arrogant. I thought Natalie would always be there, no matter what. Turns out, I was wrong. By 7:30 a.m., I was behind the wheel of my silver BMW, heading toward downtown Dallas. I knew Natalie would be driving her old sedan, the one with the dented passenger doors she never bothered to fix. She never cared about appearances the way I did, and in some twisted way, I planned to use that against her. I rehearsed lines in my head, how I'd walk into court, shoulders back, my new girlfriend Melanie at my side, making it crystal clear who had moved on and who hadn't. I wanted the judge, the lawyers, even the reporters lingering outside the courthouse to see her as the struggling wife clinging to scraps while I walked away with everything polished and perfect. Ugly, yes, but at the time it felt like winning. I spotted her before she spotted me. Natalie was pulling into the courthouse lot just as I was stepping out of my BMW. Rain splashed against her windshield, and that old sedan looked even sadder under the storm. I walked right up to her window and topped it. She rolled it down slowly. Her face looked calm, too calm. "Well," I smirked, "guess this is it. Dallas County Courthouse, room 304. You ready to walk out with nothing?" I expected her to snap, or at least roll her eyes, but she didn't. She just looked at me, steady, like she was holding something back I couldn't read. Then she said softly, "Eric, you should ask yourself why your father's name is on those offshore accounts." And then she rolled the window up, just like that. But here's where it got strange. As I walked away, umbrella in one hand, briefcase in the other, I saw her pick up her phone. She was dialing someone. Not Tara, her best friend. I knew that number by heart. Not her sister in Austin either. This was different. She turned her head away, but I caught the expression on her face. Determined, calculated. I heard her say one line before I stepped too far out of earshot. Yes, we're ready. Bring it now. And bring it now. My mind kept circling back to that. Tell me, if you were in my shoes at that moment, watching your soon-to-be ex-wife make a mysterious phone call right before court, what would you be thinking? Would you brush it off or would you panic? Comment below. I want to know if I was overthinking or if you would feel the same dread creeping in. I thought maybe I was imagining things. I mean, what could she possibly pull off in a courthouse where the law, the money, the influence, all of it was stocked in my favor? She was just Natalie, the girl from Garland who worked double shifts as a nurse before she met me. But she didn't look nervous. She didn't look broken. She looked ready. And that terrified me more than if she had been crying. I'll be honest, I let my arrogance cover up my fear. I turned to Melanie, who was holding her umbrella like she was posing for a magazine cover, and I whispered, "Relax. She's bluffing. She doesn't have the guts to stand against me." Melanie smirked, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. You know that moment when you're trying to convince everyone else, but really you're trying to convince yourself? That was me. The rain got heavier, sheets of water slamming the courthouse steps. Reporters were already setting up under tents, cameras angled, waiting for a spectacle. And something told me Natalie was about to give them one. Every instinct I had as a lawyer screamed at me, something is wrong. But every ounce of pride I had as a man said, she can't touch me. Which one do you think I listened to? We walked toward the courthouse entrance, umbrellas clashing with the storm, cameras flashing, microphones ready. I glanced back one last time at Natalie's sedan. She was still inside, finishing that phone call. Her lips moved, her eyes steady, her expression unreadable. And then just before I lost sight of her, I saw it. Her faint smile. Not smug, not angry, but certain. I whispered under my breath, "What the hell is she planning?" But Natalie? She whispered something else, something I wouldn't hear until later, when it was far too late to change the outcome. Her words? He thinks he knows everything. He has no idea what's coming. If you've ever underestimated someone you thought could never rise against you, then you already know the kind of storm that was waiting for me inside that courthouse. And if you don't want to be blindsided the way I was, subscribe right now. Because trust me, what happened next in that courtroom isn't just shocking, it's unforgettable.
They say you don't really understand what you had until it's gone. Looking back, I realized my marriage to Natalie had been over long before the court date. The cracks didn't appear overnight. They spread slowly, quietly, like water leaking under a foundation, until one day the whole house is sinking. I grew up in Houston, Texas, the son of Gerald Whitman, a man who believed money wasn't just power, it was protection. My father taught me that if you had enough connections, enough dollars, enough swagger, you could walk into any room and own it. Natalie came from a different world. She grew up in Garland, a suburb outside of Dallas, in a 2-bedroom house with peeling paint and a backyard swing that squeaked in the wind. Her dad was a truck driver, her mom a receptionist. They weren't poor in spirit, but money was always tight. I still remember the first time I brought her home to Houston. My mother raised an eyebrow at her Goodwill dress. My father pulled me aside and whispered, "She doesn't fit the Whitman mold, Eric." But that was exactly why I loved her back then. She was real. She didn't care about the Whitman name, the bank accounts, or the cocktail parties. She cared about me, the me without the cufflinks and expensive suits. When we got married, Natalie gave up everything she had been working toward. She was in nursing school, pulling night shifts at Baylor University Medical Center in Dallas, exhausted, but proud. I asked her to quit. I told her, "You don't need to work. Let me handle the money. Be there for me while I focus on law school and building my career." And she did. She walked away from her dream to make mine possible. She ironed my shirts before interviews, packed lunches I usually forgot to eat, sat in the stands when I passed the Texas bar exam. She was the reason I made it. But when I started winning cases, bringing home bigger checks, shaking hands with partners and judges, I stopped seeing her sacrifices as valuable. I started seeing them as invisible. By the time I became a partner at Whitman and Carter, my ego was inflated enough to fill the Dallas skyline. I thought I deserved more recognition, more luxury, more excitement. That's when Melanie Carter walked into my office. She was young, ambitious, always ready with a compliment. She laughed at my jokes, leaned close when she spoke, and acted like every word I said was gold. One late night at the firm turned into dinner. Dinner turned into drinks. Drinks turned into a mistake that became a habit. And just like that, Natalie became background noise to me. The loyal wife who cooked dinner, kept the house clean, and smiled at my parents during Sunday brunch while I entertained myself elsewhere.
You ever think you've got everything under control, only to have the ground ripped out from under you in front of the whole world? That's exactly what happened the morning I stepped into the Dallas County Courthouse. I thought it would be my show, but then that limo pulled up, and I realized I wasn't the one holding the spotlight anymore. It was just after 9 when I pulled into the courthouse lot. The rain had slowed, but the storm clouds hung heavy, dark as my mood. Dallas mornings are usually alive with sunshine and traffic horns, but that day felt different. The whole city seemed to be holding its breath. I stepped out of my BMW, Melanie clinging to my arm like we were walking a red carpet. She was dressed to impress. Black dress hugging her figure, heels clicking against the wet pavement, hair perfectly styled despite the humidity. She whispered to me, "Remember confidence. Today we finish this." I nodded, straightened my jacket, and forced a smile. To me, it wasn't just about divorce. It was about making sure everyone saw me as the winner. The courthouse steps were already crowded. Local news crews, courthouse bloggers, even a few curious passers-by were lined up under umbrellas. Microphones were extended, cameras angled, lights glaring despite the storm. "Mr. Whitman, any comments before the hearing? Do you expect the settlement to go in your favor?" another asked. I flashed a practiced grin, the kind I used in every press photo with the firm. "We're confident today," I said smoothly. "The truth always wins." The irony of that statement would hit me like a freight train later. I scanned the lot, expecting to see Natalie trudging up the steps in her beat-up sedan, hair frizzing in the rain, wearing something plain and forgettable. That's the image I wanted the cameras to capture, a wife out of her league, no match for the Whitman name. But her car wasn't there. The space she usually parked in was empty. "Maybe she's late," whispered Melanie, smirking, "or maybe she's scared." I laughed, but inside something twisted. Natalie wasn't the type to be late, and she wasn't scared. Not anymore. We were halfway up the courthouse steps when I heard it, the low hum of an engine, deep and commanding. Heads turned, reporters pivoted, even the cops on duty straightened. From around the corner, gliding through the puddled street like it owned Dallas itself, came a black Cadillac Escalade stretch limo. Sleek, shiny, untouchable. The entire crowd froze. Who shows up to divorce court in a limo? The car pulled right up to the curb in front of the courthouse. The driver, tall, sharp in a black suit, hopped out and circled around. He opened the back door slowly, deliberately, like he was introducing royalty. And then she stepped out. Natalie Brooks, my wife. But not the Natalie I remembered. Not the woman in scrubs from nursing school, not the quiet homemaker in faded jeans, not the beaten-down wife I thought I'd crushed. This Natalie wore a tailored navy suit that fit her like it was made for her. Her hair was swept back in a neat chignon, not a strand out of place. Pearl earrings glinted against her skin. Her heels clicked against the pavement with confidence I hadn't seen in years. The reporters went wild. Cameras flashed, questions flew. "Mrs. Brooks, who are you with? Why the limo? Are you making a statement?" Natalie didn't flinch. She didn't rush. She just stood tall, composed, letting every lens capture her transformation. But the real shock wasn't just Natalie. It was the man who stepped out behind her. Judge Raymond Calloway. I recognized him instantly. Everyone in Dallas did. Retired from the bench years ago, but still one of the most respected legal minds in Texas. A man whose name carried weight in every courtroom, every law school, every legal firm. And here he was, walking beside my wife. The reporters went crazy. "Judge Calloway, are you representing her? What's your connection to Mrs. Brooks?" He didn't answer. He just placed a steady hand on Natalie's shoulder and guided her up the courthouse steps like he had every right to be there. My chest tightened. My vision blurred for a second. This wasn't supposed to happen. Natalie was supposed to come alone, small, powerless. She was supposed to be embarrassed next to me and Melanie. Instead, the cameras were on her. The whispers were about her. The limo had stolen every ounce of attention I thought belonged to me. Melanie leaned close, hissing, "What the hell is going on?" I didn't have an answer. As Natalie reached the top step, she paused. Judge Calloway looked out at the crowd. His voice, though weathered with age, still boomed with authority. She won't be alone in that courtroom today. The truth needs to be heard. Gasps rippled through the reporters. Questions shouted louder. Cameras clicked faster. The statement wasn't just a headline, it was a promise. I froze. My heart pounded. What truth was he talking about? What did Natalie have? The moment those courtroom doors shut behind me, I realized this wasn't going to be the clean victory I'd imagined. I thought I was walking into a simple divorce hearing. Instead, it felt like I had just stepped into an ambush, one I never saw coming. Courtroom 304 in the Dallas County Courthouse wasn't huge, but that morning it felt packed with eyes. Reporters filled the back benches, pens ready, cameras on silent mode. A few curious law students had even squeezed in, whispering like they'd come to watch history unfold. Natalie sat at the petitioner's table, calm as a lake in early dawn. Judge Calloway was right beside her, a presence that seemed to silence even the buzz of the room. Meanwhile, I sat across from them with Melanie, who was trying to look composed, but whose hand trembled slightly when it touched mine. I should have felt like the confident attorney I had always been. Instead, I felt like a defendant walking into his own trial. Judge Rebecca Langley, known across Dallas for her sharp tongue and no-nonsense rulings, entered the courtroom. The bailiff's call echoed, "All rise." We stood. She adjusted her glasses, glanced around the courtroom, and said, "I didn't expect such an audience for a divorce hearing. Let's hope we can keep things civil." Her eyes lingered on me for a second longer than they should have, almost like she knew something. I swallowed hard. We went through the formalities, the petition, the financial disclosures, the motions already filed. Everything felt routine until Natalie stood and calmly said, "Your Honor, before we proceed with the settlement, I have evidence that changes the nature of these proceedings." My stomach dropped. This wasn't part of the script. Divorce hearings weren't supposed to have surprises. They were supposed to be predictable. Divide assets, argue over numbers, sign papers, done. Judge Langley raised an eyebrow. "What kind of evidence?" Natalie glanced at Judge Calloway, then back at the bench. "Evidence of misconduct. Evidence that the respondent, Eric Whitman, has acted in ways that not only affect this marriage, but the integrity of his law practice." I clenched my fists under the table. Misconduct? Integrity? This was ridiculous. But before I could object, Judge Calloway stood up. "With the court's permission," he said, his voice commanding the room, "I'd like to recall a matter from several years ago, a wrongful termination case involving a man named Harold Pierce, filed against Whitman and Carter." The name hit me like ice water. Harold Pierce. A case I thought I had buried. Calloway continued. "At the time, crucial evidence went missing. Evidence that would have cleared Mr. Pierce. Instead, the firm argued he was incompetent, destroying his reputation. He lost everything. And the missing evidence? It was suppressed under Eric Whitman's oversight." Gasps spread across the room. The reporters scribbled furiously. I shot up from my chair. "Objection! Irrelevant to these proceedings. That case was settled years ago." But my voice cracked just enough for everyone to hear it. "Tell me honestly, if you were sitting in that courtroom and heard a respected judge accuse a lawyer of burying evidence, would you believe the lawyer's denial or the judge's word? Comment below. I want to see how many of you would have trusted me in that moment." Natalie didn't stop there. She pulled a thick folder from her bag, her hand steady, her eyes locked on me. "Your Honor, I also have financial records, transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, not just under Eric's name, but with authorization signatures from his associate, Melanie Carter." The room exploded. Reporters leaned forward. Melanie's face went pale. She whispered harshly at me, "What did you do?" I grabbed the folder from across the table, flipping through page after page of bank transfers, wire authorizations, email printouts. My chest tightened with each one. Where the hell had she gotten these? Melanie's composure shattered. She looked at me with wide, panicked eyes. "You told me this was all legal. You said your father's firm approved it." "Shut up," I muttered, but it was too late. Everyone heard her. The whispers rose louder. Judge Langley's gavel pounded. "Order! Order in the court!" But the damage was done. Melanie had just implicated both of us in front of a courtroom full of witnesses. I scrambled for control. "Your Honor, this is clearly a stunt. Natalie has fabricated documents. She's trying to sabotage me in the middle of a divorce." But even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. My voice wasn't the confident baritone of a lawyer winning his case. It was shaky, desperate, and every person in that room could hear it. Natalie didn't even raise her voice. She just said, "The truth has a way of surfacing, Eric, no matter how deep you bury it." Judge Langley studied the documents, then looked at Judge Calloway. If what's being presented is accurate, this goes beyond divorce proceedings. This borders on criminal misconduct. My chest tightened. My career, my reputation, my entire life balanced on the edge of her words. "Mrs. Brooks," Judge Langley asked, "what do you want this court to do? Do you want to proceed with the divorce? Or," she leaned forward, voice sharp as a blade, "do you want to file a criminal motion?" The room held its breath. Reporters froze, pens hovering over notepads. Even the bailiff stopped shifting. All eyes turned to Natalie. She didn't answer right away. She simply folded her hands on the table, her expression calm but unreadable. And in that silence, my world collapsed. Was she about to destroy me completely? Or was she still the woman who once sacrificed everything for me? I didn't know, and that was the most terrifying part. If you're hooked right now, you know this is where everything changes. One word from Natalie could end my career, or worse, my freedom. And you don't want to miss what she decides. So hit subscribe to Heat Stories right now, because in Chapter 5, the betrayals come to light, and the second major twist will leave you stunned.
I thought Natalie's attack in court was the worst of it, but I didn't know then that she'd been preparing for this moment for years, while I was busy betraying her. And the people she pulled into her corner, they turned my world upside down. It started after the night she caught me coming home late, stinking of perfume that wasn't hers. I remember her face at the kitchen table, her quiet question, "Was she worth everything I gave up for you?" I thought she crumbled after that. I thought she was broken. But behind the scenes, Natalie was rebuilding herself. While I drowned in arrogance, she took a part-time job at a small legal clinic in Dallas. Nothing fancy, just a nonprofit offering free help to people who couldn't afford big firms. At first, she told friends she was just volunteering, but it was more than that. She was learning, watching, collecting. Every intake form she processed, every attorney she listened to, every case she saw, it all added up. Slowly, quietly, she was piecing together a new identity. Not the woman who gave up her career for her husband, but the woman who would one day take her husband down. And then fate handed her the biggest weapon of all, Judge Raymond Calloway. He'd retired years before, but he volunteered at the same clinic where Natalie worked. He noticed her dedication, her sharp memory, the way she listened to clients. Over coffee breaks, they started talking. She told him pieces of her story, not everything, but enough. And Judge Calloway, the man I once idolized from a distance, became her mentor. He taught her how the system really worked, how evidence could be traced, how corruption leaves fingerprints. By the time she walked into divorce court with him at her side, she wasn't the quiet housewife anymore. She was a student, armed with lessons from one of the sharpest legal minds in Texas. But Natalie didn't find Calloway alone. Tara Collins, her best friend, was the one who connected them. I found this out later, and it burned me alive. Tara was digging too. She had contacts in Dallas, friends in legal aid, people who owed her favors. She nudged Natalie toward the clinic, knowing Calloway spent time there. So while I was sneering at Tara, calling her a meddler, she was pulling strings that put Natalie in the perfect position. Back in the present, Judge Langley called a brief recess after the financial records were introduced. The tension in that courtroom was thick enough to choke on. Reporters swarmed the hallway firing questions at me and Melanie. I brushed past them, jaw tight, trying to keep my composure, but the whispers followed me everywhere. Evidence buried, offshore accounts, misconduct. And then, in the middle of the chaos, Natalie walked out, calm, controlled. Every reporter turned to her. Every flashbulb lit her up. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't the main character in the story anymore. She was. I couldn't take it.
I pushed through the crowd until I was face to face with her. My voice came out low, dangerous. "What are you doing, Natalie? You're trying to destroy me out here. Is this really what you want?" She didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on mine, steady as stone. "You destroyed yourself, Eric. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences." Melanie hovered behind me, pale and trembling. Reporters leaned closer, eating up every word. I lowered my voice so only she could hear. "You don't understand what you're messing with. You're going to regret this." That's when she leaned close, her whisper cutting through me like ice. "Eric, you should ask yourself why your father's name is on those offshore accounts." My body went numb. My father's name? Gerald Whitman? No, that wasn't possible. My father was powerful, careful, untouchable. He'd built our family name on money and influence, yes, but offshore accounts? I stumbled back, my pulse racing. Melanie's hand clutched my arm, but it felt miles away. The reporters were shouting, cameras flashing, but all I could hear were Natalie's words repeating like a drumbeat in my head. My father's name, offshore accounts. If she had evidence tying him to those transfers, then everything I'd built wasn't just at risk. My entire family's empire was crumbling. Let me ask you, if your spouse cornered you like that, not just exposing your secrets, but dragging your family's name into it, what would you do? Fight harder? Or would you back down? I need to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments. Melanie panicked. She pulled me aside, her voice frantic. "Eric, if this is true, we're screwed. If your father's name is in those files, the feds could get involved. This isn't just divorce, it's criminal." I snapped at her. "Shut up, Melanie. Don't you see, this is exactly what she wants, panic. We can't give her that satisfaction." But the truth was, I was already panicking inside. My chest ached, my hands shook, and for the first time since the marriage began, I felt like Natalie had the upper hand. Tara was there, of course, standing just a few feet away with her arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. She didn't say a word, but the smirk on her face told me everything. She knew. She had been part of this plan from the start. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting Natalie. I was fighting an alliance. Natalie, Tara, and Judge Calloway. Together, they had more power than I ever imagined. I tried to push it out of my mind, but Natalie's whisper dug deeper with every passing second. My father's name. Offshore accounts. Could it be true? Had my father used me as a pawn in something bigger? Had I been signing documents that weren't just shady, but illegal? The thought made my stomach twist, because if that was the case, Natalie wasn't just fighting for herself, she was pulling the thread that could unravel the entire Whitman family legacy. The recess ended. The bailiff called us back inside. My legs felt heavy as I walked toward the courtroom doors. Inside, Judge Langley was waiting. Judge Calloway sat tall at Natalie's side. Reporters slid back into their seats, pens ready. And me? I was walking into a storm that had already been written in ink. Because Natalie didn't just hold evidence against me anymore. She had a weapon that could take down my entire family. If you're feeling the tension right now, you haven't seen anything. Because in Chapter 6, the Whitman family secrets explode into public view, and the fallout changes everything. So don't miss it. Subscribe to Heat Stories right now, because the deeper this gets, the more shocking the truth becomes. The moment Natalie whispered that my father's name was on those offshore accounts, the ground shifted under me. I thought this was a divorce. But now it was war. A war that reached far beyond me, into the very core of the Whitman family. Gerald Whitman wasn't just my father. He was a titan in Houston's financial circles, a man who could buy politicians dinner and walk out with promises in his pocket. People didn't say no to Gerald. They didn't question him. He built our family name on steel and oil money, then polished it with real estate and banking. He walked into rooms with that slow, deliberate confidence of a man who believed the rules didn't apply to him.
And for most of my life, he was right. But if Natalie had proof of his involvement with those offshore accounts, then my father wasn't just untouchable anymore, he was vulnerable. And if he fell, the Whitman empire went with him. Back in the courtroom, Natalie laid out her evidence piece by piece. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't grandstand. She simply handed documents to the bailiff, who carried them to Judge Langley. Bank transfers, wire authorizations, shell corporations, she said, all traced back to Whitman and Carter, and some of them authorized not just by Eric Whitman, but by Gerald Whitman himself. The room erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Pens flew across notepads. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. My father's name, on paper, in black and white. Beside me, Melanie was unraveling. Her breathing quickened. She clutched my sleeve, whispering, "Eric, this is federal. They'll bury us. We can't fight this." I shut up. But she shook her head, eyes wide with fear. "I'm not going down for your family's crimes. If I have to testify against you, I will." Her words sliced me open. The woman I betrayed my wife for, the woman I thought would stand beside me, was already planning her escape. And just like that, I was alone.
If you think the worst moment of your life is losing everything, you're wrong. The worst moment is when you realize it's already gone, and the whole world is watching you drown. That's what the final day in court felt like for me. By the time we filed back into courtroom 304, the air was electric. Every seat was taken, every reporter on edge, waiting for the kill shot. Judge Langley wasted no time. "We will now hear the final evidence," she said firmly. "This court intends to reach a conclusion today." Natalie rose, her navy suit crisp, her hair perfectly in place. She didn't glance at me. She didn't need to. Her confidence spoke louder than any words. And me? I sat there, sweating in a suit that suddenly felt 2 sizes too tight, praying for a miracle that wasn't coming. I stood to speak, trying to summon the lawyer I once was. "Your Honor," I began, forcing my voice steady, "this entire spectacle is a manipulation. My wife has fabricated evidence. She's using theatrics to destroy my reputation and my family's legacy. This isn't justice, it's revenge." The words sounded polished but hollow. I saw it in the eyes of the jury of onlookers, the way they glanced at each other, unimpressed. And then, the worst possible thing happened. The bailiff escorted Melanie to the stand. She looked fragile, shaken, but determined. Under oath, she confessed. "Yes, I signed authorizations for offshore transfers. I did it under Eric Whitman's direction. And yes, I knew some of them linked back to Gerald Whitman." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. I was scared. He told me everything was legal, that his father had it handled. But it wasn't true, and I won't lie anymore. The room gasped. Reporters nearly fell out of their chairs. And me? I felt the ground vanish beneath me. Natalie waited for the noise to die down. Then she approached the bench with one last piece of evidence, a notarized affidavit from a financial investigator. It traced the Whitman accounts step by step, showing not only my involvement, but direct authorizations from my father's personal trust. Judge Langley studied the document, her lips tightening. "This court can no longer treat this matter as a simple divorce. We are dealing with criminal misconduct on a significant scale. Imagine being in my shoes right then. Your mistress testifying against you, your wife exposing you, your father implicated in fraud. Would you keep fighting or finally admit defeat? Be honest. Comment below because I want to know if you would have gone down swinging." My father sat in the gallery stone-faced. For years, he had been the man no one dared cross. But now, even he couldn't silence this storm. When Judge Langley read his name aloud from the affidavit, his face turned gray. He leaned back in his seat, his empire unraveling in front of strangers. For the first time in my life, Gerald Whitman looked small. Through it all, Judge Calloway sat silently beside Natalie, a steady hand of legitimacy. Every time I tried to discredit her, his presence reminded the room that she wasn't just some scorned wife. She was guided, mentored, and backed by one of Texas' most respected legal minds. And that was a battle I could never win. Finally, Judge Langley delivered her decision. In the matter of Brooks versus Whitman, this court rules in favor of the petitioner, Natalie Brooks. She will receive a favorable divorce settlement, including assets previously withheld. Furthermore, due to the evidence of criminal misconduct, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation. The gavel struck like a gunshot. My chest tightened. It was over. Before I could even process the ruling, 2 federal agents entered the courtroom. They approached my father first. Gerald Whitman, the untouchable, the titan, the man who believed the law bent to his will, was placed in handcuffs. Then they turned to me. The click of the cuffs around my wrists was louder than the reporter's gasps, louder than my own heartbeat. The cameras flashed like fireworks. I wasn't Eric Whitman, the attorney, anymore. I was Eric Whitman, the criminal. Tell me, if you were in that courtroom watching the mighty Whitman family fall, would you have cheered for justice or felt pity for the downfall? I want to know where you stand. Comment your take. As they led me past Natalie, she didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply watched me with calm eyes, as if to say, "This is the consequence, nothing more." That hurt worse than if she had celebrated. Her silence was the loudest judgment of all. Reporters swarmed as we were escorted out, microphones shoved in my face. "Eric, do you have any comment? Did you know about your father's fraud?" I stayed silent, jaw clenched, knowing anything I said would only dig me deeper. Natalie emerged minutes later, stepping into that limo again. Cameras snapped, reporters shouted her name, but she didn't stop. She moved with purpose, her story cemented in the public eye. Later, I learned what happened in that limo. As it pulled away, Natalie checked her phone. A single text appeared from an unknown number. "You exposed Eric, but you barely scratched the surface. We need to talk." She didn't show it to anyone. She just leaned back, looking out at the Dallas skyline, and smiled faintly. Because she knew, as much as she had won, the story wasn't over. And that's how it ended for me. Not with dignity, not with victory, but with handcuffs and headlines. Natalie had the last word, but the message she received that night proved one thing. There were bigger secrets still buried, and I wouldn't be the only one exposed. If you've been hooked until now, don't stop here, because in Chapter 8, Natalie's victory unravels into a deeper mystery that could shake more than just the Whitmans. Subscribe to Heat Stories right now. You don't want to miss what happens beyond the verdict.